Following it live from our West Coast newsroom for us tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. The caravan is roughly 4,000 people, mostly Hondurans, some Salvadorans, making their way through Guatemala. And at last check, they were about 150 miles from Mexico's southern border. But several hundred caravan members have broken away, either getting on buses or hitching rides, and have arrived at the Mexico border, though it is unclear if they'll try to enter Mexico alone or wait for the mass crossing. Mexican police and military are there waiting for the migrants, and the Mexican government has said anyone without a passport, visa, or other documents will be turned away or detained. But those on the ground say few, if any, of these migrants have documents, which indicates it could be a standoff, except all that separates Guatemala from Mexico are two bridges and a river. Mexico is not going to harm these people, and historically Mexico has shown little ability to stop migrants from crossing. So experts say by Friday, a lot of this caravan could be in Mexico, about 1,800 miles from the U.S. border, though we should note that our chief White House correspondent John Roberts just put into urgent that Mexico and the United States have come to terms, saying that they will try to put more shelters along the Central American-Mexico border, and that now Mexico will allow people who actually make it into the United States to turn back and come into Mexico. Those are both new. Now, the president has issued a buck stops here tweet saying, and I'm quoting, "I must in the strongest of terms ask Mexico to stop this onslaught, and if unable to do so, I will call up the U.S. military and close our southern border." The president sent another tweet blaming Democrats for what he calls an assault on our country, and clearly this has become a hot political issue, with Congressman Mike McCall, chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, saying, quote, "We have to secure that border once and for all." And while there's a huge focus on this 4,000-person caravan, the Border Patrol says 4,000 migrants cross into the U.S. every 4 days. And because of the current political climate, here's what happens to migrants with children. Listen.
We have to basically let them go outside our front door, or we transport them to places where they can get shelter and they can get help.
Right, these families are not sneaking across. They want to get caught because they know they will not be detained. So even if President Trump sends the military to the border, history shows many of the people in this caravan are likely to be on U.S. soil very near the midterms.
Yeah.
Martha.
In fact, there are 13,000 children who crossed the border basically on their own, pushed across, led in that direction by other people, and were basically taking care of all of them. So it is a huge problem. Joining me now, thank you to Trace. Joining me now, Charlie Hurd, opinion editor at the Washington Times and a Fox News contributor, Adele Malpass, Real Clear Politics national reporter, and Robert Zimmerman, DNC committee chair member. Good to see all of you tonight. Charlie, let me start with you. With regard to the bigger issue of the border and what goes through voters' minds as they watch this caravan moving towards the United States and they hear those numbers. In fact, the numbers are increasing of people, of adults now who bring a child with them when they come across the border because they know that if they have a child with them, they will be allowed in.
Which, of course, leads to a whole other problem that nobody on any side of this debate wants, which is the trafficking of children. And there are many, many documented cases where that is happening exactly for those reasons that you just said. This is not a good issue for. I know that earlier in the year with the so-called separations and all that kind of stuff, that was a boon for Democrats, and they thought that was a rallying cry. But this issue, the one thing that unites everybody on this issue is that we have to stop the problem, and there are complex parts of it, and there are and it's not, obviously it's not easy because these people in Congress haven't been able to do it in decades. Neither party has done it. But the idea, the issue of do we have a secure border or do we leave it wide open so that the problem continues, that's a no-brainer. That's like an 80-20 issue.
It is an 80-20 issue. And you know what? Some of the places where it's a very hot issue, Robert Zimmerman, are in the suburbs across America, where even, people who may not be thrilled with President Trump, when they're asked, do you believe we need to have a secure border, they say yes. So when they walk into the voting booth, these issues are going to be on their mind. And Democrats may lose some of them with these kind of images.
Actually not, because Democrats have been advocating border security for decades. In fact, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi were advocating increased funds for border security.
But no wall.
But with this, frankly, Republicans aren't advocating a wall, Martha. And the reason for that, and the reason you don't see Republicans defending Trump's policy of separating children from their families, and the reason you see this caravan take place is because the Trump immigration policies and border security policies have been an abject failure. Republicans don't want to support this wall because they know it's a waste of money and it's not going to work. And the Republicans are campaigning supporting the Trump policy of separating children from their families because it's immoral and it's a national tragedy for us to be part of that.
Right.
And so that's why this issue of border security is going to work for Democrats' advantage because the Trump administration has failed in their efforts.
Take a look at this Fox News poll. You heard Newt Gingrich talk about Kavanaugh and the caravan. People are very split on the question of Kavanaugh and the SCOTUS confirmation. 47 approve it, 48 disapprove it. And Dianne Feinstein, as we showed a moment ago in a debate, says she would absolutely favor reopening the Kavanaugh investigation next year. Adele, your thoughts on that as we take a look at the possibility of a lot of new investigations around the pipeline if indeed Democrats take the House?
One of the things we've seen with the post-Kavanaugh hearing is that independent voters are starting to decide, and they are particularly independent men are starting to fall towards the GOP, and they overplayed their hand, and so you're seeing as people are deciding. And one thing with independent voters is that's often you don't hear about is that Donald Trump won independent voters 46 to 42%, and they are essential for swing districts to capture the independent vote. And so when you look at the battleground states where Donald Trump won, if he would overwhelmingly won the independent vote. In Michigan, it was by 16 points, Wisconsin 13 points. So independent voters are very important. And both
where are
of
they
these
today?
issues
Where are they today, Adele?
Well, that's the question.
And where today?
I don't think we know where they are.
Well, according to the polls, the gender gap is 2-to-1 in favor of Democrats.
All right.
You know, one of the untold things is that when it comes to the gender gap is that really 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump. It was 52 to 43. And so the Democrat narrative, it likes to be that, women don't support Donald Trump, and particularly suburban women supported Donald Trump as well. And
that's right, but now we're in a midterm. It's a very different dynamic, and the polls reflect one issue. But the other point is this. I'm very proud of Dianne Feinstein for advocating reopening that investigation, and I think she speaks to many Americans who want to see an accountability here around whether, in fact, sexual harassment, sexual abuse took place, and the idea of respecting survivors.
All right, I want to get in one more topic before I let you guys go, because there's a lot here. The Wall Street Journal editorial today, I thought, made a really interesting point about the fact that the World Economic Forum has named the United States the #1 most competitive country as far as positive environment for business. You've got 7 million jobs open in this country. They write that we've likely avoided the recession that would have happened, they believe, at the Wall Street Journal on the editorial page, if Hillary Clinton had won. U.S. growth is driving the world economy. And they say the question that is too much below the surface for next month's election is whether Americans want to continue this prosperity. And they point out, Robert, that it is not necessarily guaranteed, because, we've seen in the past that Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, put through a short-term stimulus program under George Bush. So you can have a Republican president and Democratic economic policies that may not work as well as the ones that we have in place now. And it's not top of mind and top of discussion for a lot of people who are looking at these.
Well, it's very revealing that, in fact, despite the fact we have a strong economy and President Trump has continued the Obama economic recovery, the reality is President Obama's approval ratings are a record low for a midterm president. So I think
President Trump, you mean?
President Trump, rather, is a record low for a midterm president. Obama didn't do so well either. But the point simply is here, you don't see Republicans campaigning on the tax cut because they know it's a non-starter with the voters, and the deficit, of course, is the highest since World War II.
Quick thought, Charlie, and then I got to go.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of all this is sort of amazing. When you take a look at for example, the confirm or non-confirm poll for Brett Kavanaugh, anybody who's had this much thrown at the guy, of course, there's going to be a high disapproval rate for a nominee to the Supreme Court. The second thing is, you know, for you to claim that Democrats are all in favor of border security, Democrats are the party of sanctuary cities. So if you're the party of sanctuary cities, you can't be in favor of a border.
All right, I'm going to give Adele the last word here. Go ahead, Adele, real quick.
Okay.
We need to stay. It cannot be called the Obama recovery, because he was trying to convince voters that it was the new normal to have only 2% growth. Come October 26th, next Friday, 12 days before the election, third quarter GDP is expected out. Many think it'll be, again, the second quarter in a row where we have 4% or higher growth. People want this. It is results, and President Trump should do a victory lap when that comes out.
We will see. Thanks, you guys.